Society ridiculed a millionaire for marrying a plus-size black woman, calling it a publicity stunt. Years later, she transformed his failing company into a billion-dollar empire, revealing herself as a brilliant business strategist who had been building her own fortune in secret. Those who mocked their marriage now beg for her investment. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Julian Thorne, a man whose life revolved around the polished gleam of his penthouse and the flash of paparazzi cameras, met Isabella "Izzy" Davis at a charity gala. The champagne flutes clinked, a symphony of superficiality, but Izzy, in her emerald green dress, stood apart. Her smile, warm and genuine, cut through the manufactured smiles of the elite. He was captivated. It wasn't just her beauty, a striking contrast to the waifish models he usually favored, but her quiet confidence, an aura that shimmered beneath the surface of polite conversation. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Julian, used to calculated moves, found himself swept away by Izzy's unexpected depths. She was sharp, witty, her laughter a melodic counterpoint to his carefully constructed world. But their happiness was a beacon in a storm. The whispers started subtly, then escalated into a full-blown media frenzy. Publicity stunt, sneered the headlines. Gold digger, the vicious online comments hissed. Izzy's rich, dark skin and curvaceous figure became the target of relentless mockery. The sting of their words, sharp as shards of glass, pierced her carefully constructed composure. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the urge to retreat into the fortress of her own secrets. Yet, she stood tall, her chin lifted, a silent defiance blazing in her eyes. Julian, initially thrilled by the attention, watched the storm brewing, a disquiet settling in his heart. He saw the hurt in Izzy's eyes, a vulnerability that made him question his own shallow pursuits. He began to see a strength in her quiet resilience, a power that belied the playful exterior. The tide was turning, though he didn't yet know how profoundly. The wedding was a spectacle, a lavish affair held in a sprawling vineyard bathed in the golden light of a late summer afternoon. Champagne flowed like a river, the air thick with the perfume of roses and the murmur of hushed conversations. But beneath the veneer of celebration, a bitter current ran strong. Izzy, radiant in a custom-designed gown that hugged her curves, felt the weight of 1,000 judging eyes. Each flash of a camera felt like a tiny pinprick. Julian, handsome in his tailored suit, felt the tremor of doubt in his own hands as he looked at his bride. The vows, spoken with trembling lips, felt less like a promise and more like a desperate plea against the tide of public disapproval. Later, in the quiet intimacy of their honeymoon suite, overlooking the rolling hills, a fragile peace settled. Julian held Izzy close, his touch hesitant yet sincere. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "for the way they've treated you." Izzy, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, leaned into him, the warmth of his embrace a small solace against the storm raging outside. "It's not you, Julian," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "It's them. They're blind to what truly matters." He kissed her forehead, a silent vow to fight the tide, to protect her from the venomous words. But the honeymoon was short-lived. The reality of Thorne Industries' failing finances crashed down like a collapsing building. The honeymoon suite, once a haven of peace, became a battlefield of unspoken anxieties. The cheerful banter was replaced by tense silences, punctuated by the insistent ringing of Julian's phone. A symphony of bad news. Izzy, outwardly calm, began to subtly shift assets, moving funds through intricate channels only she understood. She felt the pressure mounting, the weight of her secret a heavy cloak. Her internal monologue echoed with a mixture of frustration and determination. "I won't let them win," she vowed silently. "I won't let them break us." The scent of stale coffee and desperation hung heavy in the air of Julian's opulent, yet increasingly empty, office. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside him. He stared at the latest financial report, the stark red numbers a brutal indictment of his failure. The once gleaming mahogany desk felt cold and alien under his hands. It's worse than I thought," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper, more to himself than the empty room. He swirled the remaining dregs of his coffee, the bitter liquid a reflection of his mood. Later, finding Izzy in the kitchen, surrounded by the comforting aroma of simmering spices, felt like stumbling into an oasis. She was humming softly, effortlessly graceful even in her worn apron, a stark contrast to the chaos that reigned elsewhere. He watched her, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "Izzy," he began, his voice hesitant. I don't know what to do." She turned, her expression a careful blend of concern and quiet strength. The lines around her eyes deepened as she smiled, a subtle, understanding smile that tugged at his heart. "We'll figure it out, Julian," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Together." He approached her slowly, the weight of his failures pressing down on him. He wanted to tell her everything, to confess his self-doubt, his fear of losing everything, but the words caught in his throat. The warmth of her presence, the familiar scent of her vanilla perfume, was a fragile comfort in his storm. He longed to confide, to lean on her unwavering support, but the seeds of doubt, planted by the relentless media onslaught, sprouted in his heart. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. They're saying it's all your fault, that you're just after my money." His voice cracked, the words laced with self-reproach and a hint of desperate accusation. Izzy's smile faltered. A moment of silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. The scent of the spices suddenly felt sharp, almost acrid. Her eyes, usually sparkling with mirth and intelligence, held a flicker of hurt, quickly masked by a composed expression. "Julian," she began, her voice steady, "I married you because I love you, not your money." The words hung in the air, simple yet powerful, a testament to her steadfast devotion. He saw the truth in her eyes, the unwavering sincerity that pierced through the fog of his self-doubt. Yet, the insidious whispers of the media still echoed in his mind, clouding his judgment. The rain continued to fall, a relentless backdrop to their silent struggle. The kitchen, once a haven of warmth, now felt charged with unspoken tension. The future of their marriage and Thorne Industries hung precariously in the balance. The weight of Julian's accusation hung heavy in the air, a palpable thing between them. Izzy's carefully constructed composure cracked, just a hairline fracture, visible only in the slight tremor of her hand as she reached for a mug. The rich aroma of cinnamon and cloves, moments before a comfort, now felt suffocating. The rain, a relentless percussion against the window panes, seemed to mimic the frantic rhythm of her heart. "I know," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm's fury. The words were laced with a weariness that belied her usual vibrant spirit. She turned away, the movement fluid yet deliberate, as if trying to contain the rising tide of emotions within. The warmth of the kitchen, previously a haven, felt cold and sterile. Julian watched her, a profound sense of guilt washing over him. He saw the hurt in her posture, the way her shoulders slumped, the subtle tightening of her jaw. He'd believed the lies, the insidious whispers that painted her as a gold digger, a social climber. And now, seeing the truth reflected in her eyes, a truth that mirrored his own inadequacy, he felt the full weight of his mistake. He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly near hers. The distance between them felt vast, an insurmountable chasm carved by his own doubt. "Izzy," he began again, his voice thick with regret. I didn't mean it." She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge his apology. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the drumming rain and the rhythmic clinking of a spoon against a ceramic bowl. The fragile peace of their home, once a sanctuary against the storm of public opinion, now felt shattered. He saw the silent struggle in her shoulders, the battle to maintain her grace in the face of his betrayal. It was in this silent battle, this heartbreaking display of quiet strength, that Julian finally understood the depth of her love. a love that transcended the superficiality he'd so readily embraced. He took a step closer, his hand finally finding hers. Her skin was cool, yet her touch was surprisingly firm. The pressure of her fingers in his was a silent affirmation, a quiet promise to weather this storm together, though the path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty. The scent of the spices, still pungent, now mingled with a new aroma. The faint, almost imperceptible scent of unshed tears. The future was uncertain, but in the shared silence, in the quiet strength of their intertwined hands, a fragile hope began to bloom. A hope as tenacious and resilient as the woman he loved. The following days were a blur of hushed conversations, strained smiles, and the ever-present weight of unspoken accusations. Julian, haunted by his outburst, retreated further into himself, his usual boisterous confidence replaced by a gnawing self-doubt. He found solace only in the quiet hum of his study, surrounded by the cold, impersonal gleam of his awards, trophies of a success now feeling hollow and undeserved. Izzy, meanwhile, moved through their opulent home like a ghost, her usual vibrancy dimmed by a quiet sadness. The scent of lilies, her favorite, now felt cloying, a constant reminder of the fragile beauty of their relationship. She spent hours in her private office, a sanctuary tucked away from the main house, the soft glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face as she worked, her fingers flying across the keyboard, a silent symphony of strategic planning. One evening, the rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the turmoil within her. She found Julian staring out at the storm, his broad shoulders slumped with despair. He looked smaller, somehow shrunken by the weight of his burdens. "Julian," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper above the wind's howl. He turned, his eyes red-rimmed and weary. I'm sorry, Izzy," he mumbled, his voice thick with regret. "I was a fool." She moved closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. His skin felt cold, clammy, and the tremor she sensed beneath his expensive suit betrayed the intensity of his self-recrimination. The scent of his expensive cologne, normally a familiar comfort, now felt strangely sharp, almost jarring in its intensity. "I know," she replied, her voice laced with a gentle sadness. "But blaming yourself won't change things. We need to face this together." He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in days. He saw not a scheming gold digger, but a woman whose strength was quietly monumental, a resilience forged in fires he couldn't even begin to imagine. He saw the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the faint lines of worry that pleated the corners of her mouth. He'd been blinded by his own insecurities, by the deafening roar of public opinion, and in that blinding storm, he'd lost sight of the woman who loved him unconditionally. A long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the rhythmic pounding of the rain. The tension in the room felt thick, palpable, hanging heavy in the air like the scent of the lilies. Then, slowly, tentatively, he reached for her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. Her touch was firm, unwavering, a silent promise of support, a strength that anchored him in the swirling tempest of his emotions. In that shared touch, a fragile hope began to rekindle, a tender ember amidst the storm. The fight to save Thorne Industries and their marriage would be long and arduous, but in that shared silence, a silent pact was formed. They would face it together. The next morning dawned gray and somber, mirroring the mood in the Thorne household. The scent of burnt coffee hung heavy in the air, a testament to Julian's distracted state. He sat hunched over the breakfast table, the newspaper's harsh headlines a stark contrast to the opulent silverware. Izzy entered, her usual vibrant dress replaced by a simple sweater and jeans, the soft fabric a reflection of her subdued spirit. The silence between them was thick, a tangible thing pressing down on them. Julian finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a mixture of shame and resentment. "They're saying it's all my fault," he mumbled, his voice rough with unshed tears. The words hung in the air, a bitter accusation disguised as a lament. Izzy's heart ached. She knew the pressure he was under, the weight of expectation crushing him. Yet his words stung. She wanted to lash out, to scream that she was fighting tooth and nail to save his company. But the words caught in her throat. She chose instead to sit beside him, her hand resting gently on his. The cool morning light illuminated the delicate veins on the back of her hand, a stark contrast to the warmth radiating from her touch. "I know," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "But we'll face this together. I'm not going anywhere, Julian." Her words were a promise, a lifeline in the storm. He flinched, pulling his hand away. The rejection was a fresh wound, adding to the already gaping chasm between them. "It's not fair, Izzy," he choked out, his voice cracking. "Everything I've built, gone." He looked at her with a raw vulnerability, the mask of arrogance and confidence finally shattered. The desperation in his eyes broke her heart. Izzy reached for his hand again. This time he didn't pull away. His touch was hesitant, unsure, but it was there. A fragile thread of hope, woven from shared despair and a tenacious refusal to surrender. The rain outside intensified, a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the turmoil within their hearts. But in the shared silence, a quiet understanding began to bloom, a fragile seed of resilience planted in the fertile ground of their shared struggle. The fight had just begun. The rain hammered against the attic windows, a relentless percussion accompanying the storm raging inside Julian. He paced, the worn Persian rug muffling his restless steps. The scent of old books and dust clung to the air, a stark contrast to the opulent fragrances usually permeating his world. He stopped abruptly, the weight of his failures pressing down on him. Izzy, seated at a small antique desk, meticulously reviewed financial documents, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the concentration etched on her face. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain. He finally broke the silence, his voice a low growl. "It's all falling apart, Izzy. Everything." Izzy didn't look up. "We're working on it, Julian." Her tone was calm, almost too calm, masking the turmoil she knew raged beneath the surface. She knew the depth of his despair, the crushing weight of public scorn, the terror of losing everything. He slammed his fist on a nearby table, the old wood groaning under the impact. "Working on it? It's hemorrhaging money. The board is breathing down my neck. They're whispering about bankruptcy." He choked on the word, the shame palpable. Izzy finally looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and quiet strength. The lamplight caught the sheen of unshed tears. "I know," she said softly, her voice a soothing balm against the storm of his anger. "But I have a plan. A good one." He scoffed, the sound bitter and devoid of hope. "A plan? What plan? You haven't done anything. You've just watched." The accusation hung in the air, a poisoned dart aimed at her heart. The sting was sharp, but she held her composure, her gaze unwavering. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "It's not hopeless." Her words, however, lacked their usual conviction. Even she wasn't entirely sure she believed them. The battle for Thorne Industries, and for her own carefully guarded secrets, was far from over. The mahogany of Julian's study felt cold beneath Izzy's fingertips as she traced the grain, the polished surface a stark contrast to the rough edges of her own anxieties. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside her. Julian sat hunched over a sheaf of papers, the city lights painting shadows across his drawn face. The scent of expensive whiskey hung heavy in the air, a bitter perfume of his despair. "They want to sell," he finally said, his voice a low rumble, barely audible above the drumming rain. The words hung in the air, heavy with defeat. "They're offering a pittance, Izzy. It's over." Izzy swallowed, the lump in her throat a physical manifestation of her own internal struggle. The near exposure had shaken her, a chilling reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything. She'd sacrificed a significant investment, a painful but necessary move to buy time. But time was running out. She crossed the room, the plush carpet soft beneath her bare feet, and knelt beside him. The cool leather of his chair pressed against her cheek as she rested her head on his shoulder. His scent, usually a comforting anchor, now felt like a suffocating weight, a symbol of his crumbling world. "It's not over, Julian," she whispered, her voice catching on a sob she desperately fought to suppress. The words tasted like ash in her mouth, hollow and unconvincing even to her own ears. She felt a tremor run through her, not just from exhaustion, but from a deep well of fear. Fear for her carefully constructed world, fear for their future, and most terrifying of all, fear for the man she loved. "Don't lie to me, Izzy," he murmured, his voice rough with unshed tears. His hand, calloused but gentle, rested on her head. His touch, once a source of comfort, now felt heavy with self-recrimination. I'm working on it," she managed, her voice a fragile whisper against the tempest raging outside. The lie felt like a betrayal, a violation of the trust she desperately craved from him. She knew she couldn't reveal her hand. Not yet. The risk was too great. But the strain of keeping her secret, of bearing the weight of his despair and her own looming disaster, was pushing her to the brink. She needed a miracle, a stroke of luck, a sliver of hope in the storm-ravaged landscape of their lives. And soon, very soon, the tension in the room crackled like static electricity. Julian's accusation hung in the air, a poisoned dart aimed at Izzy's heart. The city lights, blurred by the rain-streaked windows, cast long, distorted shadows across the opulent room, emphasizing the chasm growing between them. The scent of lilies, usually a calming presence, now felt cloying, a suffocating sweetness mirroring the bitterness in Julian's words. "You think I don't see it, Izzy?" he'd spat, his voice raw with pain and suspicion. "You've been playing me from the start. This marriage, it was all a calculated move." Izzy's breath hitched. The carefully constructed facade she'd maintained for so long threatened to crumble. Years of meticulous planning, of calculated risks, of burying her true self beneath a carefully crafted persona, all seemed to evaporate under the weight of his accusation. The cool marble of the fireplace felt cold against her hand, a stark contrast to the burning anger that threatened to consume her. "Julian," she began, her voice a low, controlled counterpoint to his outburst. "You're hurting." The words felt inadequate, a pathetic attempt to quell the firestorm raging within him. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that scraped against her nerves. "Hurting? I'm ruined, Izzy. And you're the reason why." The sting of his words was palpable. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she straightened, her shoulders firm, her gaze unwavering. "I've never wanted to hurt you, Julian," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But your self-pity is blinding you." She paused, choosing her words carefully, each syllable laced with steel. Perhaps it's time you saw things from a different perspective." She let the implication hang in the air, a subtle hint of the truth that was about to shatter his world. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the tempest brewing within her heart. It was time. The time for revelation was near. The silence that followed hung heavy, thick with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows of their penthouse apartment, mirroring the storm raging inside Julian. He paced, a caged lion, his expensive suit rumpled, his usually impeccable hair a mess. The scent of rain mingled with the lingering aroma of lilies, creating a strangely discordant perfume. Izzy watched him, her expression unreadable. The carefully constructed mask she wore was starting to crack, revealing glimpses of the fierce intelligence and quiet strength beneath. She felt a familiar sting of frustration, a bitter taste on her tongue. Years of planning, of silent sacrifices, all threatened by his blindness, his self-absorbed despair. "You're wrong, Julian," she finally said, her voice low and measured, a counterpoint to the tempest in the room. The words felt inadequate, insufficient to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. He stopped pacing, turning to face her, his eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and anger. Wrong? My company is crumbling, Izzy. Everything I've worked for is falling apart. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice cracking with desperation. And you stand there, so calm, so collected. The accusation stung, but Izzy held her ground. She rose from the plush sofa, the silk of her dress rustling softly against the fabric. The rain continued its relentless assault against the glass, a rhythmic percussion accompanying their silent battle. She moved closer to him, the space between them shrinking, the air charged with unspoken words. "I'm not collected, Julian," she said softly, her voice laced with a weariness that belied her controlled demeanor. "I'm exhausted from fighting for us, from fighting for you, even when you refuse to see it." She reached out, her fingers lightly brushing his arm, a gesture of both tenderness and defiance. He flinched away, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored her own. "Don't touch me," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "You've done enough damage." The words were a cruel blow, but Izzy braced herself. She had anticipated this moment, this breaking point. This was the crucible where their relationship would be forged anew or shatter completely. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the battle ahead. The time for subtle maneuvers was over. The time for revelation was at hand. The penthouse, usually a sanctuary of opulence, felt like a cage. Rain lashed against the windows, a relentless percussion accompanying the silent war between Julian and Izzy. The air hung thick with unspoken accusations, the scent of lilies clashing jarringly with the metallic tang of rain. Julian, a shadow of his former self, slumped onto a velvet armchair, the plush fabric offering little comfort. His expensive suit was crumpled, a stark contrast to his usual polished appearance. Izzy watched him, her heart aching. The meticulously crafted facade she'd maintained for so long was cracking, revealing the exhaustion beneath. She'd poured her heart and soul into saving his company, her secret efforts a constant, exhausting dance of deception. His blindness, his self-absorbed despair, was a bitter pill to swallow. The weight of it pressed down on her, suffocating her. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Julian," she said, her voice barely a whisper above the drumming rain. The words felt inadequate, pathetic even, against the enormity of his despair. He didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on the swirling rain, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Then explain this," he rasped, his voice rough with unshed tears. "Explain why, when everything is falling apart, you remain so calm?" The accusation hung in the air, a poisoned dart aimed directly at her heart. She wanted to scream, to lash out at his unfair judgment, but instead, she took a deep breath. Years of carefully cultivated control, of concealing her brilliance, were threatened by this moment, this crushing weight of his misunderstanding. "Calm?" she echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I'm terrified, Julian. Terrified of losing you, of losing everything we've built." The admission felt raw, vulnerable, but she needed him to see the truth. She stepped closer, the silk of her dress whispering against the carpet. He flinched away. The distance between them, once a chasm of unspoken resentments, now felt like an unbridgeable gulf. "Don't," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Don't pretend you care." The words were a blow, a brutal attack on her carefully constructed composure. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a solitary path down her cheek. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about him, about his inability to see beyond his own pain. And in that moment, Izzy knew that her carefully laid plans, her secret empire, paled in comparison to the battle for her marriage. The time for subtlety was over. The time for truth had arrived. The opulent penthouse suite, usually a haven of calm, throbbed with tension. The rain outside mirrored the storm raging within Julian. He paced, his expensive loafers scuffing the polished marble floor, a stark contrast to Izzy's stillness. She sat on the plush sofa, the silk of her dress shimmering under the soft light, a picture of controlled composure that belied the turmoil within. His accusations echoed in the cavernous space, each word a tiny, poisoned dart. "You're playing some game, Izzy?" Julian's voice was raw, laced with bitterness. "This calm, it's a performance." Izzy's fingers tightened around her wine glass, the crystal cold against her skin. She met his gaze, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "A performance? Is that what you think of my love for you?" Her voice was low, controlled, yet tinged with a heartbreaking vulnerability. The scent of lilies, usually so comforting, now felt suffocating. He stopped pacing, his back to her, the rain a relentless soundtrack to their silent battle. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Izzy. Everything is crumbling. And you just watch." The unspoken truth hung between them, the near exposure of her secret financial maneuvering, the critical decision she'd had to make, jeopardizing millions, all while trying to hold their marriage together. She felt a surge of anger, a bitter taste on her tongue. Years of planning, of calculated risk, all thrown into disarray by his inability to see past his own despair. "I'm not watching," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm fighting, Julian. Fighting for us, for Thorn Industries, for our future." The words were a fragile bridge across a widening chasm. The weight of her secrets pressed on her, suffocating her. He turned, his face etched with pain and distrust. "Then fight harder," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Fight like you're not just waiting for it all to fall." His eyes, usually glittering with arrogance, were now dull with despair. Izzy stood, the silk of her dress rustling, her silhouette a powerful counterpoint to his slumped form. "I'm not waiting, Julian. I've been fighting from the start. But I can't do it alone." The admission was a raw, desperate plea, stripped of all pretense. The rain continued its relentless assault, a mirror to the turmoil within their hearts. The moment was a turning point, a precipice. The time for subtle maneuvers was over. The truth, hidden for so long, was about to be unveiled. The next morning, the city awoke to a blizzard of breaking news. Izzy's face, usually hidden behind a veil of quiet dignity, was plastered across every headline. The opulent penthouse suite felt strangely quiet. The storm outside subsided, replaced by an eerie calm. Julian sat at the breakfast bar, the untouched continental breakfast a testament to his lack of appetite. The newspaper lay discarded, the bold typeface a stark reminder of the seismic shift that had occurred. He stared at the photograph, Izzy, radiant, resolute, announcing her vast fortune and her takeover of Thorn Industries. Shame burned in his chest, a bitter contrast to the icy fear that gripped him just hours before. He felt the weight of his own arrogance, the sting of his unfounded accusations. A soft knock came at the door, followed by Izzy's entrance. The silk of her dress, yesterday a symbol of their silent battle, now flowed around her like a victorious banner. There was a strength in her eyes, a quiet power that humbled him. The faint scent of expensive coffee mingled with the familiar lily perfume, a scent that no longer felt suffocating, but comforting, a symbol of her unwavering presence. I didn't know," he mumbled, his voice thick with remorse. His gaze dropped to his hands, calloused from years of neglecting his business, now trembling slightly. Izzy approached, her movements graceful despite the tremor in her own hands. She pulled out a chair opposite him, the silence thick with unspoken emotions. "I wanted to tell you," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years of silent sacrifice. "But I couldn't risk jeopardizing everything." He looked up, his eyes searching hers. The bitterness had receded, replaced by a dawning understanding. He saw not a schemer, not a gold digger, but a woman who had loved him unconditionally, despite his flaws, his arrogance, his self-destruction. "It was all a lie," he whispered, the admission a release of years of self-deception. The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. He saw the hurt flicker in her eyes, a brief shadow across her radiant victory. "Not all of it," she corrected gently, her voice laced with a bittersweet smile. "The love wasn't a lie, Julian. That was real. The raw vulnerability in her voice pierced through his guilt, grounding him in the reality of their connection. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The warmth of her skin was a grounding anchor amidst the turbulence of his emotions. The chasm between them, once seemingly unbridgeable, felt suddenly narrow, filled with the promise of a renewed beginning. The storm had passed, leaving behind the quiet calm of a new dawn. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now shimmered with unexpected possibilities. The penthouse suite, usually a sanctuary of opulent calm, felt charged with a nervous energy. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden rays, a stark contrast to the storm of Izzy's revelation that had swept through the city. Julian, still reeling from the shock, paced the expansive living room, the polished marble floor cold beneath his bare feet. The scent of lilies, Izzy's signature perfume, clung to the air, a bittersweet reminder of their tumultuous journey. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying the turmoil within. Shame gnawed at him, a bitter taste mingling with the lingering fear. He'd publicly accused her of being a gold digger, a cruel irony considering the truth. He pictured the headlines, her face radiating power, a stark contrast to his own image of defeat. A knock echoed through the room, a hesitant sound that spoke volumes. Izzy stood in the doorway, her silk dress a whisper of movement, the color a deep amethyst that seemed to absorb the remaining shadows of doubt. Her face, though etched with weariness, held a quiet strength that humbled him. "Julian," she said, her voice soft, devoid of accusation. It was the calm after the storm, a stillness that was more unnerving than any tempest. He stopped pacing, the sudden cessation of movement highlighting the tremor in his hands. "Izzy," he began, his voice barely a whisper, lost in the vastness of the room. She moved towards him, her steps measured, deliberate. The distance between them, once a chasm of misunderstanding, now felt bridgeable. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. The contact sent a jolt through him, a spark of warmth in the icy landscape of his guilt. "I know you hurt me," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "With your words, with your doubt. But seeing you like this, it hurts too." Her eyes, usually bright and full of life, were clouded with a sadness that mirrored his own. He saw the years of unspoken sacrifices reflected in their depths, the years she'd spent secretly building her empire, all while bearing his doubts and the world's scorn. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, the familiar scent of lilies a comforting balm against the storm of his remorse. He didn't speak, didn't need to. In that embrace, the unspoken apology resonated louder than any words could ever convey. The weight of his arrogance began to lift, replaced by a dawning understanding of the depth of her love, her strength, her unwavering belief in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. This was not the end, but a new beginning, a fragile, hopeful dawn. The news spread like wildfire. Isabella "Izzy" Davis, the seemingly quiet wife of Julian Thorne, was a billionaire, a self-made billionaire. The whispers turned to roars, the hushed tones to shouting headlines. Julian watched the unfolding chaos from his penthouse office, the city a glittering tapestry of shock and awe below. The champagne he'd poured felt like acid on his tongue. Shame burned in his chest, a relentless fire consuming his self-assuredness. He'd accused Izzy of being a gold digger, a shallow, opportunistic woman. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Now, the world saw her brilliance, her quiet power, the empire she'd built in the shadows while he'd floundered. He found her on their terrace, the wind whipping through her hair, her eyes fixed on the distant cityscape. The amethyst dress, a symbol of the revelation, flowed around her like liquid moonlight. "It's a lot," Julian began, his voice barely audible above the wind's howl. He felt small, insignificant, a speck of dust in the wake of her storm. Izzy turned, a faint smile playing on her lips. "It is," she agreed, her voice calm, surprisingly devoid of triumph. "But it's also liberating." He watched as she inhaled deeply, the crisp night air filling her lungs. He saw the years etched onto her face, the years of hard work, of sacrifices, of keeping her true self hidden. He saw the strength, the resilience, the unwavering spirit he'd been too blind to recognize. I am so sorry," he mumbled, the words catching in his throat. The apology felt pathetically inadequate, a feeble attempt to mend the chasm he'd created. She moved closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The touch, gentle yet firm, conveyed more than any words could express. "I know," she said, her voice soft, understanding. "But the apologies I need, those come from others, from those who judged, who scorned, who believed the lies." He nodded, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about him and Izzy anymore. This was about a larger reckoning, a societal shift. The city lights seemed to pulsate with the weight of it all. The shame remained, a heavy cloak, but beneath it, something else bloomed. A fragile hope, a newfound respect, a burgeoning love, stronger now, forged in the fires of misunderstanding and revelation. He knew their journey had only just begun. The next morning, the city felt different. A tangible hum of disbelief vibrated through the air, a collective gasp echoing Izzy's revelation. Julian awoke to a barrage of texts and calls, a cacophony of apologies and awe. He stared at the ceiling, the weight of his past actions pressing down. The penthouse, usually a symbol of his success, felt suffocating. He got up, needing the crisp morning air. He found Izzy on the terrace, not gazing at the city, but tending to a small herb garden she'd surprisingly cultivated. Sunlight caught the amethyst dress draped over a chair, a discarded relic of last night's drama. The scent of rosemary and thyme filled the air, a calming contrast to the storm raging outside. "They're all calling," he said, his voice rough. Izzy turned, a gentle smile replacing the steely resolve of the previous night. "And apologies, mostly apologies. A few offers of investment." He chuckled, a humorless sound. "Funny how quickly the tide turns." She nodded, her gaze fixed on a sprig of rosemary. "The irony isn't lost on me either," she said, her voice low. "But it's not about the money, Julian. It's about the judgment, the casual cruelty." He walked towards her, the quiet strength she exuded both daunting and comforting. "I was a fool," he confessed, the words escaping in a rush. "Blind, arrogant, I let the world dictate my perception of you, of us." The sun warmed his face, but the chill of his actions lingered. He saw a flicker of hurt in her eyes, a brief moment of vulnerability before she masked it with a quiet acceptance. "I understand," she responded, "but understanding doesn't erase the pain. It needs time, Julian. Both of us do." He reached out, his fingers brushing hers. Her hand was warm, surprisingly strong. He held her gaze, seeing not just the brilliant businesswoman, but the woman who'd loved him despite his flaws. This was the beginning, not the end. The dawn was breaking, illuminating the path ahead, a path that required not only rebuilding a company, but rebuilding a relationship forged in the crucible of public scrutiny and self-deception. The city below seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next chapter. The scent of old books and dust motes dancing in the sunbeams filtering through the tall windows of her childhood library filled Izzy's memories. This room, tucked away in her grandmother's rambling Victorian house, held the secrets of her past. Rows of leather-bound volumes whispered tales of entrepreneurs and innovators, their triumphs and failures etched in faded ink. Here, amidst the comforting weight of history, Izzy found solace. Here, she'd hatched her ambitious plans, her fingers tracing the spines of books that fueled her dreams. Flashbacks flickered, a young Izzy, poring over financial statements, her brow furrowed in concentration. A teenage Izzy, coding late into the night, the glow of the monitor painting her face in an ethereal light. A determined young woman, navigating the cutthroat world of finance, her resolve unwavering. Each success, each calculated risk, had been meticulously documented in a worn, leather-bound journal, a secret chronicle of her rise. The journal lay open now, its pages filled with her elegant script, detailing her early investments, her shrewd strategies, her unwavering faith in her vision. She traced a line with a finger, a faint smile playing on her lips. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving something to herself, about silencing the doubters, about building a legacy beyond the superficial glitter of wealth. The quiet strength she'd cultivated over years wasn't merely a shield. It was the foundation upon which she'd built her empire. And now that empire was about to change everything. The weight of the past, the sacrifices she'd made, the long hours spent in solitude, solidified her resolve. This wasn't revenge. It was vindication. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room, a symbolic representation of the changing tides in her life and the life she shared with Julian. The future, once shrouded in secrecy, was now unfolding before her, both thrilling and daunting. The next chapter, a symphony of challenges and opportunities, awaited. The mahogany boardroom felt cold, despite the crackling fireplace. Julian, his face etched with a mixture of shame and awe, watched Izzy. The air hummed with the aftermath of her bombshell announcement, the revelation of her billions, a fortune amassed in secret. He'd expected anger, fury even, but her words, delivered with quiet power, had left him speechless. He saw a glint of something in her eyes, not triumph, but a weary sadness. I didn't know," he finally managed, his voice hoarse. He reached for a glass of water, his hand trembling. Izzy sat across from him, the tailored suit unable to completely hide the subtle curve of her body. The expensive fabric couldn't disguise the vulnerability in her posture. "I had reasons, Julian. Reasons I couldn't explain then, but perhaps now you understand a little more." Her voice was low, laced with a hint of pain. The fire crackled, a counterpoint to the silence that hung heavy in the room. Julian saw the lines of fatigue etched around her eyes, the faint shadows beneath her cheekbones. He saw a woman who'd carried a burden, a secret, for years. The woman he judged, mocked, and misunderstood. He pushed back his chair, the sound jarring in the quiet room. He walked towards her, the polished floor reflecting his remorse. He stopped a few feet away, the distance feeling vast, unbridgeable. "I was a fool," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A blind, arrogant fool. I let the noise drown out the truth, the real you." He paused, searching for the right words. "I am so sorry, Izzy, for everything." She didn't speak, her gaze fixed on the flames. The scent of wood smoke filled the air, mingling with the scent of her perfume. A subtle, sophisticated fragrance that seemed to encapsulate her complex nature. The light glinted on the diamond stud in her ear, a tiny spark of defiance in the quiet apology. He sat beside her, the cool leather of the chair a stark contrast to the warmth radiating from her, a warmth he'd only begun to truly appreciate. The weight of his past actions pressed down on him, a heavy cloak of self-reproach. "Let's start again," he whispered, his hand hesitantly reaching for hers, her fingers long and elegant, intertwined with his. The simple gesture held the promise of a future built not on appearances, but on understanding, respect, and a love that had weathered the storm. The storm, however, had revealed the strength of their bond, forging a connection deeper than the superficial judgments of society. The following day, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Izzy's penthouse apartment, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The city stretched out below, a breathtaking panorama of steel and glass. Yet Izzy felt strangely detached. The weight of her revelation still pressed upon her, a heavy cloak of responsibility. Julian's apology, heartfelt and raw, echoed in her mind, yet a lingering unease remained. She sat at her minimalist desk, the cool glass smooth beneath her fingertips. The scent of jasmine, her favorite, filled the air, a comforting counterpoint to the turmoil within. She reread the email from her longtime confidant, Chloe, a surge of warmth easing the icy grip of doubt. Chloe's words offered validation, understanding, but also a stark reminder of the challenges ahead. Rebuilding Thorn Industries was just the beginning. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Julian stood in the doorway, his usual sharp suits replaced by a simple cashmere sweater. He looked different. The arrogance had been replaced by a hesitant vulnerability that both intrigued and unsettled her. The lines of worry around his eyes deepened as he met her gaze. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and hesitant. The morning sun seemed to catch the faint gold in his hair. I wanted to talk about everything." Izzy nodded, a slow exhale escaping her lips. The city noise faded as she focused on him, on the raw honesty etched on his face. "I'm ready, Julian." The coffee she'd been nursing grew cold in her hand, unnoticed. He approached slowly, his eyes searching hers. "I understand if you need space," he began, his voice betraying a nervousness that was oddly endearing. "But I want to understand. Your life, your choices, everything you kept hidden." He paused, and for a moment, only the quiet hum of the city and the gentle clinking of ice in their untouched glasses filled the silence. Then, Izzy spoke, her voice soft yet firm. "It wasn't easy, Julian. Hiding who I am, building my empire in the shadows, while constantly facing your judgment." A tear traced a path down her cheek, unnoticed until Julian gently wiped it away. His touch was tentative, respectful, the very opposite of the careless gestures of the past. The warmth of his touch was a stark contrast to the chill of the morning air coming in through the open window. The scent of the city, of coffee, and of jasmine hung heavy, mingling with the unspoken emotions between them. The dawn of a new beginning was breaking, however uncertain its path might be. The scent of old books and polished mahogany filled Izzy's childhood library, a sanctuary she'd recreated in her memory. Sunlight, filtered through stained glass windows depicting scenes from African mythology, painted kaleidoscopic patterns on the dusty floor. This room, tucked away in her family's modest Harlem brownstone, held the echoes of her dreams, the quiet ambition that blossomed in the fertile ground of adversity. Here, amidst the towering shelves, she devoured biographies of titans of industry, meticulously charting their strategies, learning their weaknesses, formulating her own. Each book was a brick in the foundation of her secret empire, each whispered ambition a testament to her unwavering resolve. A younger Izzy, all sharp angles and fierce determination, peered out from a faded photograph nestled among the books. The image captured a flicker of the pain, the quiet humiliation she'd endured, facing subtle prejudice and overt dismissal. The image was a stark contrast to the confident woman she'd become. The flashback ended, leaving Izzy feeling the phantom weight of those years. She traced the lines of a worn copy of The Prince, her fingers lingering on Machiavelli's words. The ruthlessness required to succeed hadn't come easily. It was a carefully honed weapon forged in the crucible of her early life. But it was never wielded for malice, only for survival, for the unwavering pursuit of a future free from the limitations others tried to impose. "It wasn't just about the money, Julian," she whispered to the empty room, her voice catching with unshed tears. "The years of secrecy, the calculated risks, the constant need to maintain a facade, the emotional toll was immense. The weight of those secrets had nearly crushed her, yet her fierce spirit had persevered." The image of Julian's bewildered face when she revealed her true self flashed before her eyes. She saw his confusion, his shame, but beneath it all, a glimmer of admiration, of respect. It was a fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. The journey to rebuild their relationship, to forge a new foundation of trust, would be arduous. But this time it wouldn't be built on lies, but on the unshakable truth of who she was. This time she wouldn't hide. This time she would be truly seen. The jasmine scent, a familiar comfort, couldn't entirely mask the lingering scent of fear and uncertainty that clung to her, yet mixed with the heady fragrance of possibility. The sterile scent of antiseptic clashed with the lingering aroma of expensive coffee as Izzy surveyed the Thorn Industries boardroom. Rows of mahogany desks gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the sun-drenched library of her childhood memories. Julian sat beside her, his usual arrogance replaced with a quiet nervousness that tugged at her heart. He watched her, his gaze filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation, a stark departure from the condescending glances of the past. They're actually listening, Izzy, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes fixed on the assembled executives, their faces a mask of stunned silence. Izzy nodded, her own emotions a complex tapestry of relief, exhaustion, and a burgeoning sense of vindication. The initial shock of her revelation had subsided, replaced by the exhilarating challenge of rebuilding, of proving them all wrong. They're listening because they know I can save this company, and I will. Her voice, though firm, held a note of weariness. Years of silent planning, years of carefully concealed brilliance, had taken their toll. The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Then a hesitant hand shot up. A voice, tinged with uncertainty, spoke. "Ms. Davis, your proposed restructuring. It's radical." Izzy smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of her lips. Radical change is often necessary for radical results. Thorn Industries isn't just failing, it's stagnating. My plan is not merely to save it, but to revolutionize it. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. The fear in Julian's eyes was replaced by a flicker of hope. I didn't understand," Julian confessed, his voice catching slightly. "I was so blind, so focused on the superficial." He looked at her, genuinely contrite, and the weight of his apology hung heavy in the air, as real as the mahogany table between them. This was the beginning, the fragile seedling of trust that would, hopefully, bloom into something lasting. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Izzy felt a surge of optimism, a quiet conviction that they could overcome this, together. The weight of her secrets, though still present, felt lighter, the burden shared. The boardroom hummed with a nervous energy, a low thrum that vibrated through Izzy's polished heels. Sunlight streamed through the expansive windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a stark contrast to the shadows of doubt that had clung to Julian for months. He sat beside her, his usual tailored suit slightly rumpled, his usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled, a testament to the sleepless nights and crushing weight of responsibility. "Their skepticism is understandable," Izzy said softly, her voice a calming balm against the storm brewing within the room. She reached for his hand, her touch firm and reassuring. The warmth of her skin seeped into his, a quiet anchor in the churning sea of uncertainty. Julian squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of her strength. "But they're also intrigued," he whispered, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the executives. The initial shock of Izzy's revelation had given way to a hesitant curiosity, a cautious optimism replacing their prior scorn. A palpable shift had occurred, a tectonic plate shift in the landscape of Thorn Industries. The air crackled with the anticipation of change. Izzy's restructuring plan, a daring, revolutionary approach, was laid out before them, a testament to her years of meticulous planning, her innate understanding of the market, and her unwavering belief in her vision. Each slide, each carefully chosen word, was a brick in the foundation of a new empire, one built not on fleeting trends, but on solid strategy and innovative thinking. The scent of expensive leather and polished wood filled the air, a sharp contrast to the earthy aroma of Izzy's childhood library, a place where she'd first dreamt of building her own empire. Those memories, once buried deep, now fueled her resolve, giving her the strength to face the skepticism and doubt swirling around her. The next few hours blurred into a whirlwind of detailed explanations, pointed questions, and tense negotiations. Izzy's calm confidence was a counterpoint to the nervous energy in the room. Her answers were precise, her insights sharp, her vision unwavering. Slowly, the initial resistance crumbled, replaced by grudging admiration, then genuine respect. Julian watched, a quiet pride welling up inside him, his earlier self-doubt fading as he witnessed her brilliance unfold. He saw her not just as his wife, but as a force of nature, capable of reshaping the very landscape of their world. The weight of his past mistakes settled upon him, heavy and undeniable, but Izzy's presence, her unwavering support, eased the burden. He had been so blind, so preoccupied with superficiality, that he'd almost lost everything, including her. He wouldn't let that happen again. He wouldn't. The mahogany table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the boardroom, reflecting the strained faces of Thorne Industries executives. Izzy, her powerful shoulders squared, felt a familiar tightening in her chest. The scent of old paper and expensive cologne hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the crisp, clean scent of the sea she missed from her childhood. Julian, beside her, squeezed her hand, his knuckles white. His usual confident swagger was replaced by a nervous tremor in his jaw. "Their doubt is understandable," Izzy said, her voice low but steady, a counterpoint to the buzzing unease in the room. "But it's not insurmountable." She met each gaze, her own unwavering. Years of meticulous planning, years spent building her empire in secret, culminated in this moment. The risk was immense, but the potential reward even greater. A senior executive, Mr. Henderson, a man whose skepticism had been particularly vocal, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Thorne," he began, his tone still laced with suspicion. "Your unconventional methods there." "Unconventional, yes," Izzy finished, a slight smile playing on her lips. "But effective. My investments weren't built on hype or fleeting trends. They were founded on solid research, calculated risks, and an understanding of the market that, I believe, surpasses many of the strategies currently employed here." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, feeling the weight of years of hard work pressing down on her, yet simultaneously feeling a thrilling sense of liberation. Julian watched her, a wave of admiration washing over him. The woman he'd initially seen as a trophy wife was revealed to be a strategic genius, a titan of industry. He felt a profound shift in his perception of himself, of their relationship. His shame was raw, heavy, almost unbearable. The meeting stretched on, a battle of wits and wills. Izzy expertly dismantled each objection, her responses sharp, precise, laced with a quiet confidence that gradually eroded the executive's resistance. Her deep understanding of the market, her innovative vision, her sheer determination, it was undeniable. She spoke of synergies, of untapped potential, of a future where Thorne Industries would not just survive, but thrive. Her words were a symphony, each note carefully placed to create a breathtaking crescendo of hope. A hush fell over the room as Izzy concluded her presentation. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then, slowly, hesitantly, heads began to nod. The tension, so palpable moments before, began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. Palpable shift had indeed occurred. Julian felt a tear escape, quickly wiping it away, his heart swelling with a mixture of relief, pride, and profound love for the extraordinary woman at his side. The future, once shrouded in darkness, now seemed filled with limitless possibilities. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, Julian felt truly ready to face it. Together, the air in the Thorne Industries design studio hummed with controlled chaos. Sunlight streamed through the expansive windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden rays. Izzy, surrounded by sketches and mood boards, felt the familiar thrill of creation, a stark contrast to the boardroom battles of the past few days. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the faint aroma of charcoal from a nearby artist's workspace. Julian, usually a picture of polished composure, sat perched on a stool, sketching tentatively with a charcoal pencil. His brow was furrowed in concentration, a far cry from the arrogant aloofness he'd displayed only weeks ago. "It's different," Julian mumbled, his gaze fixed on the sketch. It was a preliminary design for a new line of sustainable clothing, a concept Izzy had championed. Izzy smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Different how?" He hesitated, then looked up, meeting her gaze. I feel involved. Like I'm actually contributing, not just observing. The admission was raw, vulnerable. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Izzy approached him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. The touch was light, yet it carried the weight of their shared journey, of the unspoken apologies and burgeoning trust. You are contributing, Julian. Your insights are invaluable. Remember that presentation you gave last week on sustainable materials? It sparked a whole new direction for the team. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the sunlight, a glimmer of something akin to hope flickering within their depths. The shame was still there, a persistent undercurrent, but it was being slowly eroded by a sense of purpose, of renewed self-worth. I never appreciated your business acumen before, he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. I was so blinded by everything else. We both were, Izzy responded softly, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. But it's never too late to learn. A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the soft scratch of charcoal on paper. The studio, once a symbol of his failing empire, now felt like a space of rebirth, of collaboration, of a love rekindled in the crucible of adversity. The transformation wasn't solely about Thorn Industries' revival. It was about their own personal renaissance, a testament to their resilience and the strength of their evolving bond. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they faced it together, side by side, equals in a shared ambition. The cacophony of apologies was deafening. Izzy, perched on a plush, velvet armchair in her newly renovated office, a stark contrast to the sterile, impersonal space it once was, sifted through a mountain of emails. Each one, a contrite plea for investment, a desperate attempt to regain lost face. The scent of lilies, her favorite, filled the air, a deliberate counterpoint to the lingering bitterness she still felt. Julian, watching from the doorway, saw the weariness etched onto her face, the subtle tremor in her hand as she discarded another email. They're all crawling back, he murmured, his voice laced with a strange mixture of awe and guilt. He'd expected relief, perhaps even a touch of triumph, but instead, he found a profound sadness washing over him. He knew he'd caused her pain, and he wasn't sure how to truly atone. Izzy sighed, the sound barely audible above the hum of the city outside. Crawling is an accurate description, Julian, and I'm still deciding whether to let them. She didn't meet his gaze, instead focusing on the intricate silver bracelet adorning her wrist, a reminder of her own journey, her own hard-earned success. The polished mahogany desk reflected the city lights, mirroring the glittering facets of her meticulously constructed empire. Yet, the reflection showed more than just professional success. It displayed the weight of responsibility now resting on her shoulders. This wasn't just about money. It was about the impact she could have, the lives she could change, and the legacy she wished to leave behind. You deserve more than crawling, Julian said softly, taking a step closer. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers. You deserve respect. He hesitated, unsure of how to articulate the tidal wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. The weight of his past actions pressed down on him, a heavy cloak of regret. Izzy finally looked at him, her eyes, usually sparkling with intelligence and fire, now clouded with a profound weariness. Respect isn't enough, Julian. It's about genuine change. Not just for me, but for others who have faced similar prejudice. Her voice, though quiet, carried the unwavering strength of her conviction. She knew she held immense power, and she was determined to use it wisely. The future held endless possibilities, but it would take far more than apologies to truly rebuild their lives, their relationship, and the trust that had been so deeply fractured. The mahogany desk felt cool beneath Izzy's fingertips, the polished surface reflecting the city's glittering expanse. The scent of lilies, sharp and sweet, did little to mask the underlying fatigue clinging to her like a second skin. Julian's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken regret. Respect isn't enough, she repeated softly, more to herself than to him. The weight of her success, the sudden shift in power dynamics, pressed down on her, a crushing yet exhilarating burden. She traced the intricate silver of her bracelet, a tangible reminder of her long, arduous climb. Each curve, each tiny bead, represented a sacrifice, a strategic move, a moment of doubt overcome. This empire wasn't built on luck. It was forged in the fires of her resilience, her unwavering belief in herself. The city lights, a shimmering tapestry outside her window, mirrored the complexity of her feelings. A thrill of triumph mixed with the bitter taste of past injustices. Julian's presence, once a source of anxiety, now felt different. His gaze, usually filled with self-absorption, now held a profound sadness, a desperate plea for forgiveness. He stepped closer, his hand outstretched, hovering hesitantly over hers. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the gentle hum of the city. The air crackled with unspoken emotions, a potent cocktail of regret, awe, and a nascent hope. Izzy finally met his eyes, her own mirroring the tempest within. "It's about rebuilding," she whispered, her voice catching slightly. "Rebuilding trust, rebuilding respect, rebuilding what we lost in the storm." She squeezed his hand, the touch surprisingly comforting. The coldness of the mahogany desk was forgotten as warmth spread through her. The weight of her responsibilities, the weight of the past, seemed lighter somehow. The future, though uncertain, suddenly felt full of possibility. A partnership forged not in fleeting infatuation, but in the crucible of adversity, promised something real, something enduring. The lilies, a testament to her achievement, began to smell sweeter now, imbued with the fragrance of healing and renewed hope. The boardroom hummed with nervous energy. Sunlight slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, frantic stars. Izzy sat at the head of the mahogany table, the same table where Julian had once paced, his anxieties mirroring the failing company. Now, the air crackled with a different kind of tension, anticipation. The scent of expensive coffee hung heavy, a stark contrast to the lilies that had filled the room earlier. Julian watched her, a mixture of awe and trepidation etched on his face. He'd seen the headlines, the breathless pronouncements of her fortune, the apologies flooding in from those who'd sneered at their marriage. He'd seen her transform from a woman he'd underestimated into a titan of industry. His heart ached with a potent cocktail of shame and burgeoning admiration. "They want in," Izzy said, her voice low, steady, betraying nothing of the whirlwind inside her. She tapped a file on the table, the crisp paper a counterpoint to the chaotic thoughts swirling within her mind. Every single one of them, the same vultures who circled, ready to feast on Thorn Industries' carcass. A bitter laugh escaped Julian. "Karma's a cruel mistress, isn't she?" Izzy didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on the city stretching before them. The weight of her decisions pressed down, heavy as the cityscape. She felt the familiar sting of resentment, the phantom pain of past slights. Yet, a new feeling, stronger than bitterness, pulsed within her, the thrill of power, the satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. But it wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about rebuilding, not just Thorn Industries, but their relationship, fractured by his doubt and her carefully guarded secrets. "It's not just about revenge, Julian," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "It's about building something better, something sustainable, something just." He nodded slowly, his eyes mirroring the complexity of her emotions. The arrogance that had once cloaked him had been stripped away, revealing a man humbled by his mistakes, seeking redemption. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm here to help." His voice, though subdued, held a strength Izzy hadn't heard before, a genuine desire to learn, to participate, to contribute, to rebuild. The city lights outside pulsed, mirroring the flickering hope blooming within them both. The future, however daunting, suddenly felt less like a battleground and more like a shared journey. The news spread like wildfire. Isabella "Izzy" Davis, the seemingly quiet wife of Julian Thorn, was revealed not as a socialite clinging to wealth, but a self-made billionaire, a mastermind strategist who'd quietly amassed a fortune larger than Thorn Industries itself. The once gleaming skyscrapers of the city seemed to shimmer with a new, incredulous light. Inside their penthouse apartment, overlooking the breathtaking cityscape, the air crackled with a strange mixture of tension and relief. Julian, stripped bare of his former arrogance, watched Izzy pace the floor, the plush carpet muffling her restless steps. He'd seen the interviews, the shocked faces of his former colleagues, the groveling apologies from those who'd scorned their marriage. Shame burned hot within him. "They're all begging," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper, lost in the vastness of their opulent living room. The scent of jasmine from the nearby bouquet seemed oddly jarring against the storm raging within him. Izzy stopped pacing, turning to face him. The sharp lines of her jaw softened as she met his gaze. The vibrant hues of the sunset painted her face in warm light, highlighting the deep intelligence in her eyes, an intelligence he'd been blind to for so long. "And what do you think we should do, Julian?" she asked, her voice calm yet laced with a quiet power he'd only begun to understand. The weight of the situation pressed down, but there was a steeliness in her resolve, a strength that emanated from her very being. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture revealing the exhaustion etched onto his features. I don't know. I messed up, Izzy. Terribly." His voice cracked, the admission raw and heavy with regret. He'd spent years believing he could control his image, only to be humbled by the very woman he'd underestimated. Izzy walked towards him, the click of her heels a small, sharp sound in the quiet room. She reached out, her fingers gently brushing against his cheek. The touch, soft yet firm, conveyed a depth of empathy that pierced through his self-recrimination. "We rebuild," she said, her voice soft, a promise whispered between them. "Together. This isn't just about Thorn Industries anymore. This is about us." The implication hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the fractured trust they were now painstakingly attempting to mend. The city lights, a million sparkling jewels spread across the dark expanse, mirrored the intricate, challenging path ahead. The journey was daunting, but now, hand in hand, they faced it together. The scent of freshly brewed coffee, rich and dark, mingled with the faint aroma of Izzy's jasmine perfume. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden rays. Thorn Industries, once a symbol of Julian's precarious success, was now experiencing a renaissance, a phoenix rising from the ashes of his arrogance. But the victory felt bittersweet. Julian watched Izzy, her brow furrowed in concentration as she reviewed financial reports, the sharp lines of her face softened by the morning light. He'd spent countless nights staring at those same numbers, paralyzed by fear and self-doubt. Now he saw her navigate them with an effortless grace, a quiet power that both awed and humbled him. "The Peterson merger is looking good," Izzy said, her voice low and steady, breaking through his reverie. "They're hesitant, but the projections, they're undeniable." He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. The Peterson merger, a risky venture he'd initially dismissed, was now a keystone in Izzy's ambitious plan to solidify Thorn Industries' position as an industry leader. He'd learned to trust her judgment, a lesson learned the hard way. "You're incredible, Izzy," he said, the words sincere, devoid of the hollow praise he'd once dispensed so freely. He reached across the polished mahogany table, his hand covering hers. Her skin, warm and smooth beneath his touch, sent a jolt of affection through him. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, erasing the faint lines of fatigue etched there. "We're incredible, Julian. Together." The weight of their shared journey hung between them, the public humiliation, the shattered trust, the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding their lives and their company. But within that shared history, a stronger foundation had been forged. He saw it in the way she looked at him, a blend of affection and unwavering respect. He saw it in the way she embraced the challenges ahead, her quiet strength an anchor in the storm. The city below hummed with life, a cacophony of sounds that were once a soundtrack to his self-absorbed existence. Now, He heard them differently, a symphony of opportunity, a testament to the transformative power of love, resilience, and a woman who refused to be defined by societal expectations. He'd lost his superficial world, but he'd gained something far more valuable. A love that was unshakable, a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared vision. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he faced it without fear, hand in hand with the woman who had taught him the true meaning of strength and success. The boardroom hummed, a low thrum of nervous energy. Sunlight slanted through the panoramic windows, illuminating the faces of the assembled executives, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and awe. Izzy, impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, stood at the head of the long mahogany table, her presence commanding the room. The air crackled with the unspoken question hanging in the air. Could Thorne Industries, once teetering on the brink of collapse, truly be reborn? Julian, sitting beside her, felt a familiar tremor of anxiety. He hadn't anticipated this level of success. The weight of expectation, once a self-imposed burden, now felt shared, a responsibility he accepted with newfound humility. Izzy's hand, resting briefly on his, sent a silent message of support. He squeezed it gently. "The restructuring is complete," Izzy announced, her voice calm but firm. "And the early results are exceeding even my most optimistic projections." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. A woman in a sharp power suit, Ms. Chun, the head of marketing, leaned forward. "The brand revitalization, it's truly remarkable. We're seeing a surge in positive press, a shift in public perception." Julian watched as Izzy deftly fielded questions, her answers precise and insightful. He remembered a time when he'd scoffed at her business acumen, dismissing her as a trophy wife. The memory stung, a stark reminder of his past arrogance. Now, he saw her not just as a brilliant strategist but as a visionary, a leader who inspired loyalty and respect. The scent of success was palpable, a blend of expensive coffee and the heady aroma of ambition realized. But a subtle tension lingered, a quiet undercurrent of unease. The Peterson merger still loomed, a calculated risk that could make or break their resurgence. The future, while promising, remained unpredictable. Izzy caught his gaze, her expression unwavering. "We'll face it together," her eyes seemed to say, a silent promise echoing the sentiment of their shared morning coffee. The air in the room, thick with possibility, held the sweet scent of triumph and the lingering tang of uncertainty. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Julian felt a true sense of partnership, a shared journey towards a future that was both bright and uncertain. The penthouse suite overlooked the glittering cityscape, a million pinpricks of light against the inky canvas of night. Izzy, curled on the plush sofa, sipped her chamomile tea. The delicate floral sent a counterpoint to the lingering tension in the air. Julian paced, the polished marble floor echoing his restless energy. He stopped, running a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying his inner turmoil. "The Peterson merger," he began, his voice low. "It feels risky, too risky." Izzy looked up, her gaze steady. The firelight danced in her eyes, reflecting the warmth that always calmed him, even now. "It is a risk, Julian, but a calculated one. My projections show a significant upside." He sighed, the sound heavy with doubt. "But what if I'm wrong? What if I've ruined everything?" The self-doubt that had plagued him for so long threatened to engulf him again. Izzy rose, crossing the room with a grace that belied her strength. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "You haven't ruined anything, Julian. We faced worse. Remember the initial backlash? We survived that. The memory of those brutal months, the relentless tide of public scorn, flickered between them." He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the fierce intelligence and into the heart that had loved him unconditionally through the storm. The love in her eyes was a lifeline, pulling him from the depths of self-doubt. "I still feel inadequate," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "Beside you." A small smile played on her lips. "Inadequacy is a feeling, Julian, not a fact. You've learned, you've grown. You're a vital part of us, and I need you just as much as you need me." She squeezed his hand, the simple gesture communicating volumes. The fear in his eyes softened, replaced by a flicker of hope. The city lights twinkled, mirroring the dawning confidence in his eyes. The merger was still a risk, but it was a risk they would face together. The future remained unwritten, a thrilling, unpredictable adventure they would embark upon, hand in hand. The scent of roasted coffee beans hung heavy in the air, a comforting aroma in the otherwise sterile boardroom. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the golden rays. Thorn Industries, once teetering on the brink, now hummed with a renewed energy, a vibrant pulse beating in time with Izzy's confident leadership. Julian, observing from across the mahogany table, felt a familiar warmth bloom in his chest. Gone was the gnawing self-doubt, replaced by a quiet pride. He watched Izzy, her brow furrowed in concentration as she dissected a complex financial report. The sharp lines of her tailored suit couldn't mask the subtle grace of her movements. The way her fingers tapped a rhythm on the table, a quiet melody of focused energy. He remembered the sneering headlines, the cruel whispers, the relentless barrage of accusations. Now, those same voices were muted, drowned out by the resounding success of Thorn Industries. "The Q3 projections are exceeding expectations," Izzy announced, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of satisfaction. Her gaze swept across the assembled executives, each one hanging on her every word. "We're on track to surpass our initial goals by a significant margin." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Julian felt a surge of pride, not just for the company's success, but for Izzy, for the woman who had not only saved his empire but had also transformed him. He saw the quiet confidence in her eyes, the strength that had always been there, hidden beneath a carefully constructed facade of composure. He'd been blind then, consumed by his own insecurities, unable to see the brilliance that shone so brightly within her. "This is remarkable, Izzy," Julian said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. The words felt inadequate, a pale reflection of the gratitude swirling within him. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers for a fleeting moment. The warmth of her skin, the soft pressure of her fingers, sent a familiar thrill through him. It wasn't just a business partnership anymore. It was a bond forged in the crucible of adversity, a testament to their shared journey. The city outside shimmered, a glittering testament to their shared triumph. Their future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now stretched before them, limitless and bright. The penthouse suite overlooked Central Park, a tapestry of emerald green and gold under the late afternoon sun. Izzy, perched on a plush velvet chaise lounge, sipped chamomile tea. The delicate floral sent a contrast to the weight of her thoughts. The success of Thorn Industries felt less like a victory and more like a prelude. Julian entered, his usual crisp suit replaced by a worn sweater, his face etched with a weariness that tugged at Izzy's heart. He moved with a quiet grace she hadn't noticed before, a gentleness that spoke volumes about his transformation. "They're still at it," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He gestured vaguely toward the window, where a cluster of paparazzi remained stubbornly stationed, their lenses trained on the building. "The articles. They're calling me a lucky man." Izzy smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Lucky, that's all they see. They don't see the years of planning, the sacrifices, the calculated risks." She set down her teacup, the clink a sharp sound in the quiet room. "They don't see you," Julian corrected softly, his gaze meeting hers. "They never did." He walked toward her, the carpet muffling his steps. He sat beside her, the warmth of his presence a comforting weight. "It's not about them anymore, Julian," Izzy said, her voice firm but gentle. "It's about what we do next, about using this platform, this influence, to make a real difference." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the scent of his aftershave, a familiar comfort, filling her senses. The city lights twinkled below, a dazzling display mirroring the hope blossoming in her heart. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. This wasn't just about Thorn Industries. It was about reshaping a world that had judged them so harshly, a world they would now help to redefine. The weight of responsibility was immense, but she felt strangely ready. With Julian beside her, she knew they could face whatever lay ahead. The following week, Izzy hosted a small, intimate dinner party. The penthouse, usually bustling with activity, felt hushed, intimate. The scent of rosemary and lavender hung in the air, a deliberate contrast to the harsh publicity that still swirled around them. Soft jazz played in the background, a soothing balm to the tense atmosphere. Julian, dressed in a simple but elegant sweater, watched Izzy as she moved gracefully through the room, her laughter a warm melody cutting through the lingering anxieties. "This is different," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the music. He sipped his wine, the crimson liquid reflecting the flickering candlelight in his eyes. Izzy turned, her smile tinged with melancholy. "Different how?" "More real," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Before, it was all about the image, the spectacle. Now, it feels like we're finally breathing." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only with the soft murmur of conversation from their guests, mostly close friends and trusted advisors. The weight of the past few months hung heavy, but it felt different now, lighter, somehow. Izzy's efforts to use her platform to advocate for body positivity and racial equality were gaining traction, and the positive feedback was slowly outweighing the negativity. "I still see the articles sometimes," Julian confessed, swirling the remaining wine in his glass. "The ones calling me opportunistic, a fool for marrying you." A self-deprecating chuckle escaped his lips. "I deserved it, really. I was a fool." Izzy reached across the small space separating them, her hand covering his. Her touch was warm, reassuring. "You were blinded by superficiality," she said gently, her voice low and soothing. "But you're learning, and that's what matters." He squeezed her hand, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. The unspoken gratitude hanging in the air was palpable, a silent testament to their journey, their resilience, their love. The party continued, a carefully orchestrated blend of celebration and quiet introspection. But for Izzy and Julian, the evening was about more than just the success of Thorn Industries. It was about the rebuilding of their lives, their relationship, their future, together. The foundation, once built on sand, was now cemented in mutual respect, understanding, and a shared commitment to using their influence for good. The fight wasn't over, but they were finally fighting side by side, equals, partners in life and in business. The following weeks were a whirlwind of board meetings, charity galas, and interviews. Izzy, radiant in tailored power suits, navigated the media maelstrom with grace, her every utterance carefully considered, yet imbued with a raw honesty that disarmed even the most hardened critics. Julian, initially hesitant, found himself stepping into the spotlight beside her, his newfound confidence a stark contrast to his former insecurity. The scent of old money and ambition clung to the air in the boardroom, a heady mix of success and lingering doubt. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, they found themselves alone in their penthouse apartment. The city lights twinkled below, a breathtaking panorama mirroring the vastness of their achievements. Julian poured 2 glasses of champagne, the bubbly liquid hissing softly in the crystal flutes. "It's surreal," he said, his voice a low rumble, his gaze fixed on the shimmering cityscape. The champagne felt cold against his skin, a stark reminder of the chill that had once permeated his life. Izzy leaned against the window, the cool glass a welcome contrast to the warmth of his gaze. "It is," she agreed, her voice soft, "but it's also earned." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the city lights, a deep well of emotion swirling within them. "I still think about those articles," Julian confessed, swirling the champagne in his glass. The golden liquid seemed to shimmer with the weight of his past regrets. "The ones that called our marriage a publicity stunt." Izzy walked towards him, her steps quiet and sure. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle yet firm. "They were wrong," she said, her voice unwavering. "And you know it." Her eyes held his, conveying a depth of understanding that transcended words. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken emotions, a shared journey of growth, of learning, of love found amidst the wreckage of societal prejudice. The city lights continued to twinkle, a silent witness to their hard-won victory, to the love that had blossomed amidst the storm. The aroma of the expensive carpet and the faint scent of her perfume filled the room, a reminder of their new reality, a reality built on mutual respect and the resilience of their shared dreams. The following weeks were a blur of activity. Izzy, a force of nature in tailored pantsuits, tackled each challenge with unwavering focus. The scent of expensive coffee and ambition filled the air in her newly renovated office, a stark contrast to the sterile, impersonal space of Thorne Industries' old headquarters. Julian, transformed, worked tirelessly beside her, his once vacant gaze now sharp and engaged. He learned quickly, his inherent talent finally unleashed from the shackles of self-doubt. One evening, amidst the chaos, they found themselves on their sprawling balcony, the city lights a shimmering tapestry below. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from a nearby rooftop garden. Julian, sipping a glass of aged scotch, watched Izzy trace patterns on the glass railing with a thoughtful finger. "Remember that interview?" he asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. The memory of the sneering journalist's words hung heavy in the air. Izzy nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "The one where they called us a circus act?" He chuckled, a sound devoid of its former bitterness. "Yeah, that one." He paused, searching for the right words. "I feel like I owed you a monumental apology." Izzy turned, her eyes mirroring the city lights, reflecting a quiet strength. "You've already given me more than apologies, Julian. You've given me your trust, your partnership, your respect." She reached out, her fingers brushing his. The touch was electric, a silent testament to their journey. "But I still can't shake the feeling of..." He trailed off, the weight of past arrogance momentarily clouding his newfound confidence. "Shame, maybe, for doubting you, for letting the world dictate my perceptions." Izzy squeezed his hand, her touch a reassurance. "Let it go, Julian. We've built something remarkable from the ashes of those doubts. Something real." The warmth in her voice was a balm to his lingering self-reproach. The city lights seemed to dim slightly as a poignant silence settled between them, a silence richer than any words could express. The distant sounds of the city faded, replaced by the rhythmic beat of their hearts. Their love story, once a tabloid scandal, was now a powerful testament to enduring resilience and unexpected grace. The future stretched before them, limitless and bright, promising a love forged in fire, refined by adversity, and made stronger by shared victory. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of board meetings, investor calls, and strategic planning sessions. The scent of expensive leather and ambition permeated Izzy's newly designed office, a world away from the sterile, beige tones of Thorne Industries' old headquarters. Julian, surprisingly adept, navigated the complex world of finance with newfound confidence, his once vacant gaze now sharp and focused. He absorbed Izzy's insights like a sponge, his questions insightful, his contributions valuable. Their partnership, forged in the crucible of public scorn, was now a beacon of mutual respect. One evening, exhaustion clinging to them like a second skin, they found solace on their sprawling balcony. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars, a breathtaking panorama stretching before them. A cool breeze carried the scent of rain-washed earth and distant honeysuckle. Izzy, sipping chamomile tea, watched Julian meticulously assemble a miniature model of a new solar power plant, a testament to their commitment to sustainable energy. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Julian murmured, his voice low, his eyes alight with a quiet pride. He hadn't spoken of his shame, but the transformation in his bearing spoke volumes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a humility born of experience. Izzy smiled, her heart swelling. "We did this, Julian, together." A comfortable silence fell between them, punctuated only by the distant city hum. Then, a shadow fell across their quiet moment. A news alert flashed on Izzy's phone. Titan Industries, aggressive expansion threatens Thorn Industries. Titan, a ruthless competitor, was making a calculated play to acquire Thorn Industries' emerging sustainable energy division. The comfortable silence fractured. Izzy felt a familiar chill of apprehension. This wasn't just a business threat. It was a personal affront, a challenge to everything they had built together. Julian, sensing her unease, placed a comforting hand over hers. His touch was strong, reassuring. "We'll face this together, just like we've faced everything else," he said, his voice steady, his eyes unwavering. Izzy met his gaze, a flicker of determination in her own eyes. The fight had begun, but this time they weren't alone. They had each other, a bond stronger than any corporate rivalry. A love story that had blossomed from ashes, now ready to withstand any storm. The city lights, once a symbol of their tumultuous beginnings, now shone with the promise of a future forged in resilience and unwavering love. The mahogany boardroom table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, reflecting the tense faces gathered around it. Izzy, impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, felt the weight of Titan Industries' aggressive bid pressing down on her. The air crackled with unspoken anxieties. Julian, seated beside her, squeezed her hand discreetly under the table, his touch a silent reassurance. "They're trying to dismantle our sustainable energy division piece by piece," said Marcus, their chief strategist, his voice tight with worry. The scent of expensive coffee hung heavy in the air, a bitter aroma mirroring the situation. Izzy's gaze, sharp and unwavering, swept across the room. "They underestimate us," she said, her voice calm but firm, a quiet strength radiating from her. The cool confidence in her voice was a stark contrast to the nervousness she felt in her chest. The pressure was immense. Not just the financial stakes, but the fear of failure, of letting Julian down. Later, in the quiet solitude of their penthouse apartment, the city lights painting the night sky in hues of gold and sapphire, Izzy confessed her fears to Julian. "What if we lose this, Julian? What if all we've built crumbles?" Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the vibrant cityscape outside. The plush velvet of the sofa felt strangely cold against her skin. Julian pulled her close, the warmth of his embrace a comforting balm. He ran a hand through her hair, his touch gentle, his voice soft. "We won't lose, Izzy. We'll face this together. Remember the press, the ridicule? We overcame that. This is just another challenge. We are stronger now together." His words, laced with love and unshakable faith in her, were a powerful antidote to her fear. The soft glow of the city lights seemed to reflect the quiet strength in their bond. The scent of the expensive candles burning on the nearby table was a distraction from the looming threat, a moment of calm in the impending storm. The ensuing days were a blur of intense strategy sessions, late nights fueled by black coffee and determination. Izzy, fueled by a fierce protectiveness of everything they had achieved, devised a counter-strategy, a bold maneuver to outwit Titan. She felt the familiar thrill of the chase, the chess match of high-stakes business, a game she was supremely skilled at. Julian, now a steadfast ally, offered unwavering support, his confidence in her unwavering. The city, a constant witness to their journey, seemed to hold its breath. The next move would determine their fate. The city hummed a discordant symphony outside their penthouse window, a stark contrast to the quiet intensity within. Izzy traced the rim of her wine glass, the cool crystal a soothing counterpoint to the burning anxiety in her chest. "It's not just about the money, Julian," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper above the city's low roar. "It's about everything we've built." Julian, across the plush velvet sofa, reached for her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. The warmth of his touch was a tangible comfort. "I know, Izzy. I know." His gaze held hers, deep and unwavering, a testament to the years they'd weathered together. The scent of lilies, a favorite of Izzy's, perfumed the air, a fragile beauty amidst the storm brewing. Titan Industries, they're not just after Thorn Industries. They're after us, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. The weight of their shared success, their hard-won happiness, felt precarious, hanging by a thread. He squeezed her hand tighter. "We'll fight them, Izzy. We always have." The confidence in his voice, once a fragile seedling, had blossomed into a sturdy oak. He had learned, through fire and ridicule, the true measure of strength and resilience. The years of mocking headlines, of whispered criticisms, had forged a bond stronger than steel. The city lights painted streaks of gold and crimson across the cityscape, mirroring the turbulent emotions swirling within them. Izzy leaned her head against his shoulder, the soft wool of his sweater a comforting haven. The fear, though still present, was now tempered by a shared determination, a fierce love that fueled their resolve. The battle was far from over, but tonight, amidst the glittering chaos of the city below, they found solace in each other's arms, their bond a silent promise of resilience. The fight for Thorn Industries was ultimately a fight for their future, a fight for their love. The mahogany boardroom felt colder than usual, the polished surface reflecting Izzy's tense face. Titan Industries' aggressive bid hung in the air, a palpable threat. Outside, the city's relentless pulse throbbed, mirroring the frantic rhythm of Izzy's own heart. Julian, seated beside her, reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The warmth was a lifeline in the chilling atmosphere. "They're underestimating us, Izzy," he said, his voice low but firm, a stark contrast to the tremor in his hand. The Julian of old, the superficial, image-obsessed millionaire, was gone, replaced by a man forged in the fires of adversity. Izzy squeezed his hand, a silent reassurance. "They think they know us, Julian. They think they know me." A wry smile flickered across her lips, a spark of defiance in her tired eyes. The scent of expensive coffee couldn't mask the underlying tension. The air itself crackled with the impending confrontation. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of strategizing, late-night phone calls, and tense negotiations. Izzy, fueled by adrenaline and a deep well of resolve, worked tirelessly, the city lights painting streaks of exhaustion across her face. Julian, ever at her side, offered not empty platitudes, but quiet support, sharing the burden, offering insightful suggestions gleaned from his years of experience. One evening, amidst the chaos, they found themselves alone in their penthouse. The city spread before them like a jeweled tapestry. Izzy, slumped onto the sofa, stared at the swirling lights, her shoulders slumping with fatigue. This is different," she whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. "Titan isn't just a business rival. They're personal." The memory of their public humiliation, the cruel mockery, flooded back, a bitter taste in her mouth. The lilies, usually a source of comfort, seemed to mock her with their serene beauty. Julian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, a haven of strength and warmth. "We'll face them together, Izzy, just like always." His voice held the quiet confidence that only comes from facing adversity and emerging stronger. He knew the fight wasn't just about Thorn Industries. It was about protecting their love, their shared dreams, the life they had built together, brick by painful brick, against the odds. The scent of his cologne, a familiar comfort, mingled with the lilies, a potent symbol of their resilience. The battle was far from won, but in each other's arms, they found the strength to keep fighting. The city lights, once a symbol of their anxieties, now seemed to shimmer with hope. The air in the war room crackled, not just with the electricity of impending battle, but with the unspoken anxieties hanging heavy between Izzy and Julian. The scent of stale coffee and tension filled the room, a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. Izzy, her normally vibrant eyes shadowed with fatigue, stared at the projected figures, the numbers a cold, hard representation of Titan Industries' relentless advance. "Their offer, it's insulting," Julian murmured, his voice tight with controlled fury. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying the strain beneath his composed exterior. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, a stark contrast to the carefree millionaire he once was. Izzy met his gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Insulting is an understatement, Julian. It's a blatant attempt to bully us out. The coldness in her voice was a chilling counterpoint to the warmth of her hand resting briefly on his. The next few days were a blur of strategic maneuvers, whispered phone calls in darkened corners, and the constant hum of nervous energy. Izzy, fueled by a potent cocktail of adrenaline and righteous anger, orchestrated a counteroffensive with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. Julian, his initial apprehension replaced by a fierce loyalty, became her unwavering rock, offering insightful perspectives born from his own business acumen. Finally free from the shackles of his former superficiality, he watched, awestruck, as Izzy dismantled Titan's strategy piece by painstaking piece, revealing a depth of knowledge and understanding that even surprised him. One evening, amidst the chaos, they found solace in the quiet sanctuary of their penthouse, the city's dazzling lights a mesmerizing backdrop to their exhaustion. Izzy, curled on the plush sofa, the soft cashmere sinking into her skin, traced the intricate pattern of the rug with a weary finger. The silence stretched, thick with the unspoken weight of their battle. "They think they can erase us, Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the city's low hum. The vulnerability in her tone was a stark contrast to her usual steely resolve. The memory of the public mockery, the relentless barrage of insults, brought a sudden sting to her eyes. Julian rose, his movements fluid and silent, and knelt beside her, his hand gently covering hers. His touch held the quiet strength that had slowly emerged from the crucible of their shared adversity. "They'll learn, Izzy," he said, his voice a low rumble of reassurance. "They'll learn that underestimating you is the biggest mistake they could ever make." His words were not just a declaration of faith in her abilities, but a testament to the profound transformation their shared journey had wrought in him. The love that bound them now was not just a refuge, but a source of their unstoppable strength. The scent of lilies, always a calming presence in their home, felt like a promise of a future bloomed in the ashes of their past. The champagne flutes felt strangely heavy in Izzy's hand, the celebratory bubbles a bitter contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. The Thorn Industries boardroom, usually gleaming with polished mahogany and success, felt cavernous and cold. The victory over Titan Industries was undeniable, a testament to Izzy's strategic brilliance, but the exhaustion gnawed at her. Julian, his face etched with relief and quiet pride, reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The simple touch sent a wave of warmth through her, a grounding anchor in the storm of her emotions. "We did it," he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. The words, though simple, carried the weight of years of struggle, doubt, and ultimately, triumphant collaboration. Izzy managed a weak smile. "We did," she echoed, her voice trembling slightly. The celebratory air felt thin, a fragile veil over the raw emotions simmering beneath. The past few days had been a whirlwind, a blur of adrenaline and intense focus. Now, the silence that followed their victory felt almost deafening, exposing the profound emotional toll. The scent of lilies, a familiar comfort in their penthouse, couldn't quite mask the lingering scent of stale coffee and tension from the relentless battle. She looked at Julian, the man who had once been a symbol of superficiality, now standing beside her, his eyes reflecting a newfound depth and understanding. The transformation wasn't merely external. It ran deep, etching itself into the very fabric of his being. Their partnership, forged in the fires of adversity, had become something far more profound than she had ever imagined. The love they shared was no longer a fragile flower, but a resilient oak, rooted deep in mutual respect and a shared history. This victory was not just about business. It was a testament to their resilience, their love, and their unwavering belief in each other. The future, though uncertain, stretched before them, promising a new dawn, bright with the promise of a love that had defied all expectations. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windows of their penthouse. Izzy traced the condensation with a finger, the cool glass a stark contrast to the simmering emotions within her. The victory felt hollow, the champagne tasting like ash. Julian, curled on the sofa, looked smaller than she remembered, his usual sharp lines softened by fatigue. The weight of the battle with Titan Industries, a battle won, hadn't lifted. It had simply shifted. "It's quiet," Julian murmured, his voice rough. He didn't look at her. Izzy sat beside him, the plush velvet sinking beneath her weight. "Too quiet," she agreed, the words catching in her throat. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a profound exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. The scent of lilies, usually a source of comfort, now felt cloying, a stark reminder of the fragile nature of their triumph. He finally met her gaze, his eyes shadowed with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. I never thought I'd see the day," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I let my pride, my shallowness, blind me." A wave of empathy washed over Izzy. The Julian of old, the man who cared more about headlines than genuine connection, was truly gone. The man beside her now bore the scars of his mistakes, yet he carried himself with a quiet dignity she'd never seen before. This was the reward, the true victory. "You learned," she said softly, her hand finding his fingers intertwined with hers, a silent promise of support. "And that's more valuable than any empire." He squeezed her hand, his grip firm. "You saved me, Izzy. Not just Thorn Industries, but me." The confession hung between them, weighty and profound, a testament to the transformation they had both undergone. The rain outside intensified, a furious symphony mirroring the storm of emotions they had weathered together. But unlike the tempest outside, their bond felt stronger, unbreakable. The quiet that followed wasn't hollow now, but filled with the unspoken understanding of shared struggles and the promise of a future built on a foundation of genuine love and mutual respect. The battle was won, but their journey was far from over. The penthouse suite hummed with a low, almost imperceptible thrum, the quiet hum of victory. But the champagne tasted like ash in Izzy's mouth, the celebratory music a distant echo in the cavernous space. Julian, slumped in an armchair, stared blankly at the cityscape, the glittering lights reflecting a hollowness in his eyes. He hadn't spoken in hours, the silence heavy with unspoken emotions. Izzy moved towards him, the plush carpet yielding softly beneath her feet. The scent of lilies, intended to celebrate their triumph, felt suffocating. She knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The skin beneath her touch was cold, the tension coiled tight in his shoulders. "Julian," she whispered, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "It's over. We won." He finally looked up, his gaze meeting hers, but there was no triumph in those usually vibrant eyes, only a weary resignation. "At what cost?" he asked, his voice rough, his words catching in his throat. "I lost so much before we won." Izzy felt a pang of guilt. His self-doubt was a mirror to her own anxieties. The victory hadn't erased the past, the scars of their tumultuous journey. "We faced it together," she murmured, her fingers tracing the lines of worry etched deep into his forehead. "And we'll face whatever comes next together, too." He let out a shaky breath, the sound like the sigh of a wounded animal. "I never deserved you, Izzy," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I was a fool, blinded by vanity." A tear escaped his eye, a single, glistening drop that mirrored her own silent anguish. "You weren't always a fool," Izzy corrected gently, her voice thick with emotion. "But you learned, and that's what matters." She squeezed his hand, feeling the tremors in his grip. The rain began to lash against the windows, the rhythmic drumming a counterpoint to the tumultuous emotions swirling within them. "It's not just Thorn Industries, Izzy," he whispered, his gaze locking with hers, a profound gratitude filling those haunted eyes. It's everything. You gave me back myself." He leaned his head against her shoulder, the weight of his confession and years of regret settling upon her. The quiet that followed wasn't hollow, but filled with a shared understanding, the understanding that came only after a storm. The battle was won, yes, but their journey was only just beginning. The penthouse suite, a sanctuary of glass and steel overlooking the glittering cityscape, felt oddly muted the morning after their victory. The celebratory debris, discarded champagne flutes, scattered rose petals, lay like fallen confetti, a stark contrast to the quiet intensity that hung in the air. Izzy, dressed in a simple cashmere robe, watched Julian from across the room. He was at the window, his silhouette stark against the dawn's soft light, a figure etched in quiet contemplation. The city's hum, usually a symphony of energy, felt distant, muffled by the weight of their shared experience. "Julian," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper in the vast space. He turned, his face etched with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. His eyes, usually sparkling with ambition, held a haunted quality. He moved towards her, the sound of his footsteps barely audible on the plush carpet. He reached for her, his touch hesitant, as if afraid to break some fragile equilibrium. "I keep replaying it all," he confessed, his voice husky. "The mockery, the doubt. I almost lost everything, including you." Izzy met his gaze, her heart aching with the depth of his regret. "You didn't lose me," she reassured him, her voice firm but gentle. "We faced it together. Remember?" He nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "But the price. I almost lost myself. I was so consumed by appearances, by what people thought." He trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. The sunlight caught a tear that escaped his eye, tracing a shimmering path down his cheek. "You're not that person anymore," Izzy said, her voice catching slightly. She reached out, her fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from his forehead. The touch was a silent promise, a reaffirmation of their enduring connection. "You learned, you grew, and that's more valuable than any empire." He pulled her close, his embrace a haven from the storm they'd weathered. In the quiet embrace, surrounded by the remnants of their hard-fought victory, a new chapter began to unfold. A chapter written not in headlines and fortunes, but in the shared understanding and unwavering love that had survived the harshest criticisms, the deepest doubts, and the bitter sting of public humiliation. The city below continued its vibrant existence, oblivious to the profound intimacy shared within those four walls, a testament to the enduring power of love and resilience. The penthouse suite hummed with a quiet energy, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of the past few weeks. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden rays. Izzy, curled on the plush sofa, flipped through a magazine, the glossy pages a distraction from the quiet intensity that still clung to the air. Julian entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs. The aroma of rich, dark coffee filled the space, a comforting scent amidst the lingering echoes of their triumph. He handed her a mug, his fingers brushing hers, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken emotions between them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice husky with a lingering emotion she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper, a profound sense of shared history, of having weathered a storm together. "They're calling it the Izzy effect now," Julian chuckled, a hint of self-deprecating humor in his tone. He sat beside her, the warmth of his presence a tangible comfort. The past few months had reshaped him, stripping away the superficial layers to reveal a man of genuine depth. Izzy smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "And a good effect it is," she replied, taking a sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through her. Who would have thought that a publicity stunt could turn into a billion-dollar empire? He reached out, his hand covering hers. "It wasn't a publicity stunt, Izzy. Never was." His voice was low, filled with a sincerity that resonated deep within her. The weight of their past, the public scorn, the internal battles they had each fought, it all seemed to melt away in the shared warmth of that simple gesture. "I know," she said, squeezing his hand. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken gratitude and a shared understanding that transcended words. The city outside continued its relentless pace, But within the confines of their penthouse suite, time seemed to slow, allowing them to savor the quiet aftermath of their victory, their love a beacon against the storms of the past. The future stretched before them, an untamed landscape of opportunity, but for now, they were content simply to be together, their hands intertwined, their shared journey marked not by wealth or fame, but by a love that had been tested and proven true. The celebratory dinner at the Four Seasons was a blur of flashing cameras and forced smiles. Izzy felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the weight of expectation pressing down. The air hummed with the low thrum of conversation, a cacophony of voices praising her business acumen, her remarkable turnaround of Thorne Industries. Julian, beside her, looked almost uncomfortable under the spotlight, the forced cheerfulness a thin veneer over a deeper emotion. He leaned in, his voice a low murmur against the background noise. "They're all eating out of your hand now, darling. Amazing." There was a hint of awe and something else, a quiet pride that warmed Izzy from the inside out. She smiled, a genuine smile this time, not the practiced one she'd been wearing all night. "It's a collaborative effort, Julian. Remember." She squeezed his hand, the warmth a comforting counterpoint to the chill she felt in the opulent dining room. Later, back in their penthouse, the quiet hum of the city replaced the clamor of the celebration. The panoramic view of the glittering cityscape seemed to mirror the glittering success of Thorne Industries, but Izzy felt a melancholic undercurrent. She traced the rim of her champagne flute, the cool glass a contrast to the warmth of Julian's hand resting on hers. "You look tired," he said softly, his voice filled with a concern that touched her deeply. The Julian of the past would have only noticed the superficial. This Julian saw beneath the surface. "Just overwhelmed, I think," Izzy admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "It's a lot. Everything that happened, the way people treated us." He pulled her close, his arms encircling her in a warm embrace. "We faced it together, Izzy. Remember? And we won." His words were simple, but they resonated with a depth of feeling that spoke volumes. His love for her wasn't about her wealth or accomplishments. It was about the strength, resilience, and brilliance of her very being. This was the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, the man hidden beneath years of societal pressures. He kissed her forehead gently. "Let's forget about the accolades for tonight, okay? Just us." The city lights twinkled outside, a silent witness to their hard-won victory. Their love, now stronger than ever. The future held uncharted territories, but they would navigate them together. This wasn't just the culmination of a business triumph. It was the beginning of their true story. The champagne flutes clinked, a fragile symphony against the backdrop of the city's nocturnal hum. From their penthouse, the world stretched out beneath them, a glittering tapestry woven with ambition and success. Izzy, however, felt a strange disconnect. The celebratory air, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and success, felt cloying, almost suffocating. Julian, sensing her unease, reached for her hand, his touch grounding her amidst the swirling vortex of celebration. "It's overwhelming," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, the words catching in her throat. The weight of their journey, the years of silent battles and public scrutiny, pressed down on her. He pulled her close, the warmth of his embrace a comforting shield against the chill of the opulent surroundings. "I know," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. "But we did it, Izzy. We faced everything they threw at us, and we emerged victorious." She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a reassuring counterpoint to the chaotic symphony of the city. The taste of champagne lingered, bittersweet on her tongue, a reflection of her complex emotions. This wasn't just about Thorne Industries. It was about reclaiming their narrative, defying expectations, and proving the doubters wrong. "It's more than just the company, isn't it?" she whispered, her gaze drifting towards the panoramic view. "It's about proving them wrong, about showing the world what they missed." Julian nodded, his eyes reflecting the city lights, a mixture of pride and understanding shimmering in their depths. "And showing them what we have, he added softly, his gaze meeting hers, a silent acknowledgement of their enduring love. He kissed her forehead, a tender gesture that spoke volumes. Remember all those sneering faces? The whispers, the articles. They underestimated us both. He paused, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. They thought they knew us, but they knew nothing. The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and shared memories. The glittering city outside was a testament to their resilience, a backdrop to their hard-won victory. The future remained uncertain, but they stood together, ready to face whatever came their way. Their love a beacon in the darkness, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Their success was not just a business triumph. It was a testament to their unwavering love and the power of defying expectations. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden rays. The remnants of last night's celebration, champagne glasses, scattered petals, a lingering scent of expensive perfume, lay scattered about like fallen confetti. Izzy woke first, the weight of the previous night's triumph pressing down on her. The exhilaration had faded, replaced by a quiet weariness. Julian stirred beside her, his arm draped possessively across her waist. His sleep-rumpled hair and relaxed posture spoke of a man finally at peace. She traced the line of his jaw, her fingertip lingering on the faint shadow of a beard. The man beside her was different, softened, humbled. The Julian of Thorne Industries' downfall was gone, replaced by a man who finally saw beyond the superficial. "Morning," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. His eyes, when they opened, held a depth she'd rarely seen before, an understanding that transcended words. "Morning," she replied, her voice low. A silence settled between them, comfortable and intimate, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the city far below. "We did it," he said. The words a simple statement, yet laden with the weight of their shared journey. The relief in his voice was palpable. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The simple gesture felt profound, a silent testament to their resilience. Izzy nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't just about the resurrected Thorne Industries. It was about the reclamation of their narrative, a story they'd rewritten together, defying the odds, silencing the doubters. The weight of their collective past, their individual struggles, and their shared triumph hung heavy in the air between them. It was a bittersweet victory, a testament to the enduring power of love, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in themselves. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready. They were ready, together. The penthouse suite hummed with a quiet energy, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of the past few weeks. Sunlight, filtered through silk curtains, painted the room in warm hues. Izzy, curled on the plush sofa, idly flipped through a magazine, the glossy pages a blur. Julian, surprisingly, was in the kitchen, humming off-key as he carefully prepared breakfast. The sight, so ordinary yet so profoundly different from the stressed, distant man of only months ago, tugged at her heart. "Burnt toast again?" Izzy teased, her voice barely above a whisper. He chuckled, a genuine, hearty sound that resonated through the spacious room. "Nope, pancakes, with blueberries. Your favorite." The pancakes, slightly browned at the edges, were a testament to his newfound domesticity. The simple act, once unthinkable given his past disdain for anything outside of boardrooms, spoke volumes about his transformation. They ate in comfortable silence, the clinking of forks against plates a gentle counterpoint to the city's low thrum. Izzy watched him, her heart swelling with a quiet contentment. The Julian she saw now was a man who had faced his flaws, shed his superficiality, and emerged stronger, kinder, more deeply himself. I'm still processing everything," Julian confessed, breaking the silence, his gaze meeting hers. "The apologies, the offers, it's surreal." Izzy nodded, understanding flooding her eyes. The avalanche of public amends was as overwhelming as the initial wave of scorn. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his. "It's a new chapter," she said, her voice soft. "For both of us, and for Thorn Industries." He squeezed her hand, a silent agreement passing between them. The lingering fear, the constant anxiety that had shadowed their relationship, seemed to dissipate with each passing day. The future, though uncharted, felt brighter, lighter, filled with the promise of a shared life built not on public perception, but on mutual respect and unshakable love. The weight of their past, the battle they'd fought and won, served only to strengthen their bond, forging a love as resilient and enduring as the empire they had built together. The scent of lilies, Izzy's favorite, filled the air of their penthouse. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden beams. Julian, surprisingly nimble, rearranged a collection of family photos, his fingers tracing the faded edges of an old picture of his estranged father. A hesitant smile played on his lips. "He called," Julian announced, his voice low, tinged with a vulnerability Izzy rarely saw. After all these years, Izzy's heart ached with a mixture of joy and apprehension. She moved to stand beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "And?" she prompted softly, her voice a gentle caress. He apologized, said he was wrong, that he let his pride blind him to what truly mattered. "He wants to meet you." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken resentment. Izzy considered this. His father's apology was a significant step, a testament to the ripple effect of their journey. It was also a symbolic closure to a chapter of Julian's life, reflecting his personal growth. "It's up to you," she said, her voice even and calm, yet her eyes held the depth of her understanding. "If you feel ready." He nodded, a tear escaping his eye. "I am ready. I think I'm finally ready to let go." The confession was raw, deeply personal, a revelation that exposed the vulnerability beneath his carefully constructed exterior. Later, sitting on their balcony, overlooking the sprawling cityscape, Izzy traced the outline of a skyscraper with her finger. The city lights twinkled below, a dazzling spectacle that mirrored the profound transformation in their lives. "Remember when they called our marriage a publicity stunt?" Izzy murmured, a faint smile gracing her lips. The memory stung, but now it felt distant, almost surreal. Julian chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Yes, and now they're begging for a piece of our empire." He looked at her, his eyes shining with admiration and love. "It's incredible, Izzy. Everything we've built, everything we've overcome." His voice trailed off, lost in the immensity of their shared journey. Izzy leaned her head against his shoulder. The cool night air kissed her skin, a soothing balm to the emotional intensity of the moment. "It's not just the empire, Julian," she whispered. "It's us. It's the love we've built, the strength we've found in each other. That's the true legacy." And in that shared silence, under the starlit sky, they found solace, peace, and the enduring strength of a love that had defied every expectation. The mahogany desk, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected Julian's weary face. He traced the swirling grain with a fingertip, the wood cool against his skin. The opulent office, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage. He'd spent weeks avoiding Izzy, the chasm between them widening with each passing day. His guilt gnawed at him, a constant, bitter companion. Izzy entered, her presence filling the vast space.